All right. Well, thanks for everyone joining again. Maybe we have a quicker meeting since not as many people are here. No new papers other than as Joe Guarnieri last week presented a very nice overview of our recent Science Translation of Medicine paper that a lot of you guys are on. We're still trying to organize this meeting for next year. It's not really covert meeting, but I mean it can be because it's going to cover everything about non-coding RNA, regulatory RNAs from basically infectious diseases to cancer, cardiovascular disease, CNS issues, COVID and long COVID and other viruses, and then beyond, meaning space biology, quantum biology, and so on. So we're looking for sponsors. So if anyone has any ideas, please let us know or let me know. There's a few people helping organizing this. All right, let's just jump into the COVID news. As a lot of you already know, there's an uptake in which I'll go over the case numbers or the hospitalizations and the trends. There's an uptake in the cases and hospitalizations, and even slightly in deaths, but not too much, which is good. But and a lot of people in the UK and other places are thinking it's going to be BA.2.86 might be accountable for this. So that in the US we see this rise coming. The CDC has actually a pretty nice new updated site here about the variants and the newest variant. They have a lot of nice information on there, so they kind of keep track of everything. So people, a nice place where people can easily go look at, the variants and the tracking of it. And they have some nice information about BA.2.86. I'm going to go into a little bit about it, but maybe it's not as bad as people thought, even though it has like 30 different mutations. And what basically the underlying thing, the CDC updated website says the severity probably is not too much for illness, is not too different than the previous ones, even though it has all these different mutations. That's what they're thinking right now. And the transmittability might be increased, but it's not maybe any less or more transmittable than the current ones that are floating around, like the XBB and the FL1. So, and then, in here too, the increases right now in hospitalization, the US are more counted to the XBB lineages, as they claim. There's some good preprints that came out from labs that I guess really quickly took the virus and then trying to figure out how different it is from the previous variants and how well, let's say, our antibodies or neutralization assays, are different. How immune evasive, I should say, this variant is. And you can see from this paper preprint here, the lineage is fairly different than the rest of the Omicron ones. This is like the mutation breakdown. And overall, it doesn't, what's people are showing, like this paper here, if you look at the neutralization assays, there's another preprint here, looking at neutralized antibody response. You can see how, again, the difference for the lineage, and then this is neutralized antibody response from this paper here looked at this compared to the other XBBs, and here's as they say, it's a short preprint, but they basically say nothing is yet known of the severity, which is what the CDC tracker says too. But from what it's looking like, this variant might not cause like another Omicron peak that the original Omicron did. I borrowed this from the Spheres, Duncan McCann's Spheres biweekly update about there's like 4 other preprints that it looked at, again, neutralization antibody response and response for how this might respond to the different immune evasion. And again, it's not too different from this XBB and EG 5.1. So it's not as bad as we thought it might be. And then this paper came out, preprint came out yesterday, and that's actually compared it to probably this, and there's like 3 other papers that are not looking at preprints that are looking at how this variant might, how the vaccines, the new one that's going to be coming out, I think end of this month, the new that's going to cover the XBB variants. How well can this actually cause protection for the BA.2.86? And from what they're saying so far, as their top will put in his Twitter, but also the figure from this preprint, looks like, which is good news, which the new booster that's coming out this month will pretty much have equal protection for BA2.86 in addition to the XBBs and the EG and FL that's been floating around. And this is a USA Today news article talking about it also. So this is just one paper, but there's three other ones actually that seems to be confirming. They're all preprints, granted, no peer review yet, but I mean, it seems to be promising data coming in. So that's, I guess, the good news to say, where, people previously thought due to the mutations and the amount of mutations this might have, they thought this might be causing a huge immune evasion and then also make the new booster coming out of the vaccines less effective. But from all this nice work that everyone's, I guess, scrambled to do in the past couple of weeks or a month since this new variant popped up, it seemed like will be pretty well protected if you take your booster. Well, as protected as can be compared to the variants that are now floating around, I should say. So that's the good news, I guess, for this variant, even though it might be a little more transmittable and might have a little more impact. But I guess the underlying story is when the new booster comes out, go get it. If it's your 6-month window from the last booster, that's, I guess, what I've been reading. Hey, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, just a bit of clarity there. So is there any information about any ecological evolutionary advantage to this variant over the others or not yet?
I think it's still unknown. People have hypotheses because, I mean, there's there's the mutation landscape is hugely different compared to the previous variants. But I guess
and the infection rates are different. So you'd expect it has some sort of advantage. It's just not known yet. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the what people are starting to realize is that even though it has all these different mutations, and you say a little more infection, I mean, it's not gonna. More mutations might not necessarily equal more severity. That's what basically they're learning, for illness.
Right, but it could be more effective, but not as severe.
Exactly. So,
I mean, that would give it an ecological advantage. Being less severe might be an ecological advantage or evolutionary advantage as well.
Exactly.
Anyway,
right, exactly. So that's, I mean, and basically, Kevin, it's not as known yet. Yeah, exactly. But there's people thinking what you're saying too. Yeah. So the next Omicron level event, I guess, still hasn't resurfaced as they thought this one might. So that's a good thing. So let's go to the long COVID news. And I see some people hopped on. I apologize that in the email I sent you the wrong link, but your calendar had the right one. That's why hopefully I remedied the problem when I went to that other one. But okay, so some long COVID news or papers. This paper came out in Science Translation of Medicine this past week. And basically what they discussed here was looking at long COVID patients or past, right? The post-acute sequelae of COVID-19, the other terminology for it. And what they basically found is that, there might be some certain factors like this OC34 is this one that might drive you to have long COVID more than others, the presence of this. And what they also found is that the imprinting of this from other coronaviruses, meaning like the common cold, this is from the quote from a paper. So individuals, who had this, developed the OC43 of the imprinting and the specific antibody response of the previous coronavirus had this stronger binding here and the cross-reactivity to this SARS-CoV-2 version. So the previous common cold, like the OC43, which was a coronavirus family member, can potentially have caused, maybe more people to have long COVID. That's what they're claiming here. Basically, and then basically, they talk about, as something you might already guess, the autoimmunity. People who have autoimmune deficiencies, they're more prone for long COVID also, which is not as surprising. But that's the gist of this paper. I didn't get to read it in depth because I didn't have access to it. So I was looking online for different snippets. So if people have access to this paper, I'm going to send me a PDF, then I could actually look into the details of it too. Or someone already read the details of this paper, let me know. There's another paper that came out in Lancet, and this is from a group in Spain. And this is again, like there's several papers, long COVID papers that have come out the past month or two, doing the 2 year perspective and looking at what potential can you have long COVID for this long. And there's no like biology here, but they're looking at patient samples and stratifying between, they call it PCC, post-COVID condition, stratifying between patient severity and outcome, and how much long COVID they might have, or what kind of long COVID they have, and how long they've had it. And they're saying here in this, they had a fairly large cohort. They said 548 individuals, and 341 of them developed post-COVID conditions. The rest didn't, so they were comparing it. Their control group was the ones who didn't develop it, and they said basically the majority of people within that cohort did not recover after 2 years. So only about 7% recovered. This is one of the plots here showing that 7% or 7.6%, which actually did recover, and the majority of those people who did recover were men. And I think it's the figure coming up next figure I'll show you from the paper. So, and this is kind of a stratification of that they were able to take the data from the patients and cluster into 3 different groups, and these 3 different groups were identified as fatigue, primarily fatigue. So majority of them, a lot of bigger group, this group cluster A is here, a lot of them had fatigue, and that lasted for 2 years. Chronic fatigue, which is not a fun thing to deal with. And then this also group B, cluster B of patients had fatigue plus all these different neurological symptoms for the 2 years. And then group C, it was dominantly different, not neurological, more skin, smell, diarrhea, some neurosensitive symptoms.
Afshin,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, did they provide demographic data on the people in the study groups? Age, sex, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they have all those in there. Yep.
Okay, they most older or younger or scattered.
Age is not as much. It's if you, as I said here earlier, if you're the people, the 7%, the 26 subjects out of the 34, the 7.5% were men who recovered. And females get impacted with COVID more than men do.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So then, it's another plot from there showing that kind of this distribution of the men what symptoms they had that were able for them to recover, and comorbidities and so on. And, what they basically, it's something you might have guessed, if there had more severe COVID cases, the less likely you're going to recover after 2 years, or after you won't, less likely for you to recover, and what the long COVID will last 2 years. And the long COVID symptoms, which I didn't put the figure in here, but the long COVID symptoms can be, and the 2 years is not consistent. And there's some other papers showing that it comes and goes, and that fatigue, for example, can wane after, keep going down, but it's a chronic fatigue that it will last, but it might get less within the year or two afterwards. And you got to keep in mind too, this population was, the majority of them got COVID before vaccination existed. Kind of similar to people, in our group who got COVID early on in 2020 before vaccination. And there's a small cohort within this group, actually, they looked at where, I didn't show the figures here, but where they had the first booster, and then they got, or the first vaccine, I should say, and then they got COVID, and then they got the second one, from the original vaccines that came out, and then got COVID and developed long COVID. So the vaccines in that, like when you got the first one, got COVID, that didn't seem to impact the long COVID 2 year mark that much. If you got the second vaccine and then got COVID and then developed long COVID, they seem to might have had a better response for recovery. But again, a lot of those people lasted for 2 years. Nothing about Omicron, because obviously 2 years ago, Omicron didn't exist. So we don't have a 2 year perspective for Omicron yet, obviously. But that's the long COVID papers that I know of, or that I saw. That I'm sure there's plenty more that came out that I missed. So if I missed any, put it in the chat. But this is, I think, more and more what people are saying. This is just another study and there's a couple of other papers that I said, looking at the 2 year perspective, and more people are agreeing that when if people got COVID and developed long COVID, the recovery is easily, 2 years or longer for them to recover, if they ever recover. from long COVID. Some of these patients, I think, we're still going through the post-COVID conditions. So this is more of just urgency of, we need to figure out a good biomarker, a good treatment, and I guess we're talking to a few folks to see how we could develop that further. I don't know if you had any questions on this stuff. I'll keep going. Talk at the end. But this is the variant distribution as talked about earlier. Again, it's the XBB.1.16 and the EG and the FL are the dominant ones. And I said BA2.86 still hasn't really hasn't been too dominant yet in the US like it has in Europe. The wastewater is probably many of you are familiar with. You can see it's still rising, as you might expect from everything we're seeing. It's a steady rise, but depending on, and then this distribution between region and the breakdown between the variants, and you can see the EG.5 is the wastewater showing is creeping up. The XBB.1.6 is this pinkish color has been dominant here, but it looks like these other ones, like the EG.5 and the where is it? The FL should be somewhere here, but it's not. I think they lumped that with one of the other groups. But depending on which county you're in, for example, me, where I live in Middlesex County in the Boston area, you can see that there was a peak, it came down, and it goes back up, and it's going down. So some counties are still rising. Some counties have this profile, and some counties are actually going down. So I'll say check out where you live, and because not every region's the same, but on average, there's a steady rise still. And I said the variant right now that's creeping up is that this is, again, like last week, it's a variant soup. EG.5 is the one that's starting to take over, but you can see the FL.1. This is the US. FL.1.5.1 is also competing against it. And then there's a bunch of other variants, XBBs, that are there. And this other one, this HB.1, which I haven't heard too much about, which is here, is mixed in here too, but it's still very low. And you can see BA2.86 isn't here at all. Because in the US, there's very low numbers, like in the double digits, probably. They've been sequencing and getting them. And then, as you might suspect, the trends, I now just show this. I used to show a lot more trends, but in the case reporting, as we know, everywhere, it's not reliable. But you can see places that do have hospital admission and patient ICU, you can see, at least like in the US, which is the, what's that, magenta color, and like Japan reports it still. And you see the ICU patients going up. I guess US, from all the regions, hospital admissions is the only one that reports on this site. Because South Korea used to report, but they stopped back earlier this year. And the deaths haven't changed, which is good to see. At least, as we know, the variants are not causing more deaths. Might be a slight increase, but it's not anything that's cause of concern. So as we know, the virus is less severe for illness, but hospitalizations are occurring, as we see in the US and Europe. Even though they're not reporting, people are saying there's more hospitalizations there. That's it for this week.